You told me the fleet was thriving. I wired you every guilder I had. Cousin, calm yourself. The boats are on the water. Then why is my father out there bailing a canoe with a rusted paint bucket? Your father is a proud old man. He chooses that boat. 10 years, Justin. 10 years of my wages. You were the one who left. Don't come back and pretend you knew what was happening here. After a decade of loading container ships in the port of Rotterdam, 10 winters of sleeping in a rented room above a Turkish bakery, and 10 summers of skipping his own holidays so he could send more home, Patrick Okoro flew back to Agbank village in Delta State, Nigeria, with a leather satchel of contract papers, a printed ledger of every transfer he had ever sent, and a small brass compass his father had pressed into his palm the day he left. The compass still worked. He carried it in his breast pocket like a heartbeat. But when the hired car turned off the tarred road and rolled down the palm-lined path toward the river landing, Patrick asked the driver to slow twice, because he was certain they had passed the jetty. They hadn't. There was no proper jetty to pass. There was only a splintered wooden platform sagging into the brown water, a rope tied to a mangrove root, and a thin old man in a torn singlet crouched inside a canoe, scooping water over the side with a battered tin bucket. Welcome to today's story. If you enjoy emotional dramas with shocking twists and endings that stay with you, please like this video and subscribe for more unforgettable stories. And before we go on, tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from tonight. Now, to understand how Patrick Okoro ended up standing on a rotting jetty watching his 80-year-old father bail a leaking canoe with a bucket. The story has to begin the morning he came home. The flight from Amsterdam had landed in Lagos just after dawn. He took a domestic hop to Warri, then a car south through the oil towns and the checkpoints and the roadside markets where women fanned smoked catfish on grills of tin. October in the Delta was thick and green. The rains had just finished, and the air smelled of wet earth and diesel and river silt. He passed the mission school where he had learned English from a sister named Bernadette. He passed the Palm Wine Tapper's compound where he had first tasted ogogoro at 14 and been sick behind a plantain tree. He waved at faces he half remembered. Some waved back. Some watched him a moment too long, the way people watch a man who is about to learn something he has not yet learned. He should have felt it in his ribs then. He didn't. He was too busy picturing the fleet he had paid for. He had chosen the first boat himself over a static-filled phone call in his second year abroad. A wide-beamed passenger boat with 2 Yamaha engines, painted blue and white, canopied against the sun, with cushioned benches for the schoolchildren who crossed the river every morning to reach the secondary school on the other bank. His cousin Justin had promised to oversee the build. Justin was family. Justin was the one who had stayed behind when Patrick left, the one who called with updates every month, who sent photographs of new hulls being fitted, new engines being mounted, new coats of marine paint drying under the sun. Patrick had saved every image. 211 photos in a folder on his phone he had labeled Fleet. Every month for 10 years, Patrick had wired money to Justin's account at a bank branch in Warri. Every month, Justin had sent updates, sometimes a paragraph typed on WhatsApp, sometimes a voice note in the mix of Urhobo and Pidgin the cousins had grown up speaking, sometimes a photograph taken from the shore of a boat being lowered into the water, or a group of men in overalls tightening bolts on a new engine. In the second year, Justin had told him the first boat was finished and already ferrying passengers. In the fourth year, he had said the fleet had grown to 2. By the 6th year, 3 by the 10th, Justin had spoken of a small dry dock shed on the bank where minor repairs could be done, and of contracts with 2 neighboring villages, and of the respect the family name now carried on the river. Patrick had believed every word. Why would he not? Justin was his father's sister's son. They had shared bowls of pounded yam as boys. They had bathed in the same river. Blood was not something you questioned in Ogbanki. When the car turned the final bend and the palm trees opened up onto the water, Patrick asked the driver to stop. He did not step out at once. He sat with his hand on the door handle and looked through the windscreen at the landing. The jetty was a ruin. 3 planks were missing. The mooring post was leaning. A small crowd of school children in blue uniforms and white shirts stood on the bank clutching their sandals, waiting their turn to be ferried across. And in the water, just off the platform, was a single wooden canoe. Not a boat. A canoe. Hand-carved, low in the water, with a strip of tar patching a split along one flank. Inside it, an old man in a singlet worn thin as gauze was bent double, scooping brown river water out over the side with a bucket. Patrick opened the door. He set his polished shoes on the red dirt. He walked toward the landing, and his hand went automatically to his breast pocket where the brass compass sat. The old man in the canoe did not look up. He was working with the steady rhythm of a man who had been bailing for a very long time. Scoop, tip, the water inside the canoe was up almost to his ankles. When one of the school children called out, "Baba Noah, we're waiting." The old man raised his head to answer, and Patrick saw his father's face for the first time in 10 years. Patrick stopped walking. He had prepared for many homecomings on the long flights and the long nights in Rotterdam. He had imagined his father on the deck of a smart passenger boat, a captain's whistle around his neck, waving as Patrick stepped off the ramp. He had imagined an embrace that smelled of engine oil and river wind. He had imagined pointing at the horizon and saying, "You see what we built together, Papa?" He had not imagined this. His father had shrunk. That was the first blow. The wide shoulders Patrick remembered had folded in. The chest that used to lift a full drum of palm oil was now a narrow rib cage under wet cloth. The hands moving the bucket were spotted and thin, and the singlet clung to his back where sweat and river water had soaked it through. But the eyes were still the eyes. When Noah Okoro finally looked toward the shore and saw the man in the tailored jacket standing on the broken jetty, he set the bucket down slowly across his knees and said nothing at all. He only looked. And the look told Patrick that his father had known this moment would come one day, and had prepared for it, and had feared it. "Papa," Patrick's voice did not carry the way he wanted it to. The word came out of him small, the way a boy calls for his father from the bottom of a well. Noah lifted one hand from the bucket. He did not wave. He simply raised his palm, the way a man greets someone he is not yet ready to speak to. Then he went back to bailing. Scoop, tip, scoop, tip. The school children on the bank had gone quiet. They were watching the stranger in the good jacket the way children watch when they sense that something in the adult world is about to break open. Patrick stepped onto the jetty. The first plank groaned under his weight. The second one bent. He walked to the edge and crouched down. And now, he was level with the canoe, level with his father, close enough to see the deep lines around the old man's mouth and the way the singlet was not just torn but old. Old the way a garment gets when it has been washed 1,000 times in river water and hung on a line to dry in the sun. "Papa, what are you doing?" Noah did not look up. "I am bailing my boat, my son. This is not a boat. It floats. It carries children across the river. It is a boat. Where is the fleet?" Now Noah stopped bailing. He set the bucket down on the wet floor of the canoe. He rested his hands on his knees. He looked at Patrick, and the look was not angry. It was something worse than angry. It was the patient look of a man who has been holding a heavy thing alone for a very long time and does not know how to hand it to another person without breaking them. "What fleet, Patrick?" Patrick felt something turn over inside his stomach. He reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and pulled out the folded ledger. It was 3 pages of columns he had printed on his last evening in Rotterdam, 1 line for every transfer, 138 lines in total. The paper trembled a little in his hand, though the morning was still. "The 3 boats. Justin told me you had 3. He sent me pictures. He sent me the names. The Chenier, the Mercy, the Rose of the River. He said you were the captain of all of them, that you had a boy helping you with the engines, that you were ferrying passengers to Ughelli on market days." Noah closed his eyes. He kept them closed for a long moment. When he opened them again, he looked past Patrick at the school children waiting on the bank, and he raised his voice just enough to reach them. Ejiro, take the small ones to sit under the mango tree. Tell them Baba will come for them shortly. I am talking with my son. A tall girl at the front of the group nodded and began herding the smaller children back up the slope toward the shade. Patrick watched them go. 10 years ago, when he had left, none of those children had been born. When they were alone, Noah spoke again, and his voice was low. Come down into the boat with me, my son. If we are going to talk about this, we should talk on the water. The land has too many ears in this village. Patrick hesitated. He was wearing shoes that had cost him a week's wages in Rotterdam. His trousers were pressed. His jacket was lined. But his father was looking at him from a canoe half full of water, and there was no other answer to give. He set the ledger back inside his pocket. He took off his shoes and his socks and rolled up the legs of his trousers. He handed his jacket to the driver, who had come down to the landing without being asked, and he stepped down into the canoe. The canoe rocked under him. His father steadied it with one hand on the jetty post. Patrick sat down on the narrow crossbeam near the bow. The water in the bottom of the canoe closed around his bare feet, warm and brown and smelling of silt and diesel and something else, something older, the smell of the river he had learned to swim in when he was 5 years old. Noah untied the rope from the mangrove root. He picked up the single wooden paddle that lay along one side of the canoe. He pushed off from the jetty with a slow, practiced motion and turned the bow toward the middle of the river. He did not paddle hard. He let the current do most of the work, correcting only now and then with a small twist of the blade. He was not going anywhere in particular. He was giving them water between themselves and the village. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Patrick watched his father's hands on the paddle. They were the same hands that had taught him to tie a fishing line. The knuckles were larger now. The skin was looser. There were small pale scars along the back of the right hand that Patrick did not remember. Thin lines like a cat had walked across it long ago. Papa, those scars. Noah glanced at his own hand as if he had forgotten the scars were there. From the paint bucket, the handle broke a year back. The metal edge caught me a few times before I learned to hold it differently. It is nothing. Patrick swallowed. How long have you been rowing this canoe? Which time? The first time or this time? This time. Since I left. Noah was quiet. He looked upriver toward the bend where the water disappeared into the mangroves. I never stopped, my son. I have been on this river every morning since your mother passed, and that was before you left. When you went to Rotterdam, I told you I was slowing down. I told you the young men were taking over. That was the last true thing I told you about the river. Patrick felt his chest tighten. Papa, you told me you had retired. You told me you had bought a small piece of land past the church and were growing cassava. You told me you were resting. I said what Justin told me to say. The name struck the air between them like a small stone dropped into water. Patrick sat forward. The canoe wobbled. Noah steadied it with the paddle. Justin told you what to say to me? Justin came to me in the second year. He said, Uncle, my cousin in Holland is sending money for a boat. He wants to build something for the village. Let me handle it. You are too old for this work. Just tell him you have retired. Let him rest his mind. I did not know then what he was going to do. I thought he was building the boat. I thought I would see it on the water within the year and step onto it myself and tell you thank you on the phone. But the boat came. A boat came. Yes, one boat. In the third year. Blue and white with 2 engines. It came up the river from Warri on a Tuesday afternoon and half the village came out to watch it dock. Justin stood on the deck and waved. He said it was mine. He said the papers were in my name. He gave me a captain's cap and told me to put it on for a photograph. I put it on. He took the picture. He sent it to you, I believe. Patrick remembered the photograph. His father in a stiff new cap, standing beside a gleaming boat, one hand on the rail. He had made it the wallpaper on his phone for a year. So, the boat was real. The boat was real. What was not real was who it was for. Noah rested the paddle across his knees. The canoe drifted with the current slow and easy, and Patrick could see the far bank now. the palm trees leaning toward the water, and a thin trail of smoke rising from a cooking fire somewhere in the trees. The morning after the boat arrived, Justin came to my house. He brought a bottle of schnapps and a folder of papers. He said, "Uncle, you know I am the one running this business for Patrick. The boat is in your name because Patrick wanted to honor you. But the operations, the fuel, the fares, the maintenance, all of that is my work. I will handle the money. You just rest." He put the papers in front of me. He showed me a line, and he told me to sign. I could not read what was above the line. My eyes were already going by then. I signed where he pointed. He poured me a small glass of the schnapps. He said, "Uncle, we are going to make this family proud." Then he took the papers and he left. You signed something you had not read. I signed what my sister's son put in front of me. In this village, Patrick, when your sister's son comes to your house with schnapps and papers and the name of your own son in Holland on his tongue, you sign. That is how it is done. That is how it was done for my father and for his father. I did not know Justin was not that kind of man. Patrick pressed his palm against his forehead. The sun was climbing. The water in the bottom of the canoe was rising again, and he could feel it moving around his ankles. "Papa, we are taking on water." "Yes, there is a split near the stern. I patched it last week with tar and a strip of rubber, but the rubber does not hold long. Pick up the bucket, bail while we talk." It is good for a man to have something to do with his hands when the words are heavy. Patrick picked up the tin bucket. It was lighter than he expected and dented all along one side. He scooped and tipped, and after a few minutes he understood the rhythm his father had been keeping. It was not fast work. It was patient work. It was the kind of work a man could do for hours if he had to, and had to. "Tell me about the second boat, Papa." The second boat came a year later, larger than the first. Justin brought it up the river the same way, with a small crowd and a photograph. He put me in the cap again. He took the picture. He said, "Uncle, Patrick has built you a fleet." I was proud that day, Patrick. I will not lie to you. I stood on the deck of that boat, and I thought of you in Holland, and I thought, my son is a man now. My son is doing what a first son should do. And the third? 2 years after the second. Same story, same cap, same photograph. By the time the third came, though, I had started to notice things. What things? Noah looked down at his hands. I never captained any of those boats. Not once. Justin told me the passenger route needed a younger man at the wheel because of the currents past the second bend. He said I would be the owner and the young man would be the pilot. I accepted this. I am old. My knees are not what they were. It made sense to me. But then the fares started coming to Justin's pocket. And never to mine. Patrick stopped bailing. He held the bucket suspended above the water in the canoe, and a thin brown stream trickled from its rim back down between his feet. He kept all the fares, every naira. He told me the first year that all the money had to go back into the boats, fuel, repairs, paying the young men who piloted. He said, "Uncle, in the fourth year we will start taking profit. Just be patient." The fourth year came. He said the same thing. The fifth year, the same. By the sixth year, I stopped asking. Why did you stop asking? Noah was quiet for a long time. The canoe drifted. A kingfisher darted from a branch on the near bank and cut a bright blue line across the water. Because of what the village had started to say about me, Patrick set the bucket down slowly on the crossbeam. What were they saying? That I was a miser. That my son in Holland had made me rich and I was hoarding the money. That I had 3 boats on the river and would not let my own neighbors ride at a discount. That I made the school children pay full fare even though I could afford to ferry them for nothing. That I had turned into an old man who loved money more than his people. Papa, none of that was true. I know it was not true. But how do you argue with the village, my son? How do you stand in the market and say, I am not the one keeping the fares, it is my nephew, He tricked me into signing papers I could not read. Who would believe such a story from an old man against a young one who was building a house on the hill and driving a Hilux and buying rounds of beer at the Palm Wine Joint? Patrick felt the anger begin. It started very small, in a place low in his belly, and it rose slowly, the way heat rises through water. Justin has a house on the hill? A big one. Cement blocks. Zinc roof. 2 floors. He finished it last dry season. He said the money came from a cocoa contract he had won in Sapele. That is the story he tells. And the villagers believe him. The villagers see what they see. They see him build. They see me row this canoe. And in between the two things, they draw the line that makes sense to them. The line is that I am selfish. The line is that I am hoarding. They stopped greeting me in the market a long time ago, Patrick. Chief Ekpu's wife used to bring me pepper soup on Sundays because she and your mother were age mates. She stopped 4 years ago. She would not say why. She did not need to say why. Everyone had decided who I was. Patrick looked at his father. The old man was staring past him now at the far bank, and there was no self-pity in his face, only a great tiredness. Papa, why did you not write to me? Why did you not send word? A letter. Anything. I could have come home. I could have stopped it. Noah turned his eyes back to his son, and now Patrick saw that they were wet, but the wetness did not fall. Noah was too old and too proud to let it fall. For 2 reasons, my son. First, because I did not want to be the father who called his only son home from a good job in Holland to fight with his cousin over money. What kind of man does that? I raised you to build a life, not to leave it and come back to a village quarrel. And the second reason? Noah drew in a slow breath. His shoulders lifted, then settled. The second reason is the children. Patrick waited. His father was looking at the far bank again, where the trail of cooking smoke was thickening into a small gray column. When Justin took the boats, he raised the fares. He said the fuel had become expensive. He said the engines needed servicing. He raised them again the next year, and again the year after. By the 5th year, a single crossing on any of the 3 boats cost more than most of the families in Ogbanke earn in a week. The traders could still pay. The oil workers from the camp could still pay. But the school children, my son, the school children could not. And their mothers could not. So they stopped going to school? Some stopped. Some walked the long way around, through the swamp, past the old lumber road. It is 14 kilometers on foot. 2 little girls were bitten by a snake on that road 3 years ago. One of them died. Her name was Onome. She was 9 years old. Her mother is Mama Blessing, who sells fried plantain in the market on Tuesdays. After the child was buried, I went to my house and I sat on my bench and I did not eat for 2 days. Then I got up and I went down to the river and I pulled this canoe out from under the palm shed where I had left it since your mother died. I patched it. I put it in the water. I have been ferrying the children across ever since. For no charge. Only what a mother can spare. Sometimes a cup of Gary. Sometimes nothing at all. Patrick could not speak. He picked up the bucket again because he needed something to do with his hands. He bailed. He tipped. He bailed. He tipped. The water level in the canoe went down a little, then rose again, patient as a tide. How many, Papa? How many children do you carry each morning? On a school day, between 30 and 40, sometimes more when the market children come. I make 3 or 4 crossings before 8 o'clock. Then I rest in the shade until the afternoon when I take them back. You are 80 years old. I am 81, Patrick. My birthday was in July. Nobody remembered. I did not mind. I was on the river that day. There was a girl called Ufuoma who had a mathematics examination on the far bank. I took her across at 6 in the morning. She hugged me when we reached the other side. She said, Baba, I will pass because of you. That was my birthday gift. It was enough. Patrick set the bucket down. He put his face in his hands. His shoulders shook. but he made no sound. He was a man who had learned in Rotterdam how to cry without noise, because the walls of the room he had rented were thin, and the Turkish family below did not need to hear a grown African man weeping over the news from home. Noah watched him. He did not reach across the canoe. He did not touch his son. He waited, and when Patrick lifted his face again, the old man spoke very quietly. "Do not weep for me, my son. Weep for Onome if you must weep. Weep for her mother. I chose this canoe. Nobody put me in it. I chose it because a village that has forgotten its old ways still has school children who need to learn theirs. As long as I could hold the paddle, there was going to be a crossing. That was the bargain I made with myself. That was the only answer I had to what Justin had done." Patrick lowered his hands to his knees. He looked at his father, and he saw the man he had left in Ogbanke, still there under the thin singlet and the scarred hands. "Papa, I did not come home only for a homecoming. I came home for work." Noah lifted the paddle from his knees and dipped it into the water. He gave the canoe a small correction against the current. "What work, my son?" "There is a company in Rotterdam, Vanderburg Maritime. I have worked for them for 8 years. 3 years ago, they won a contract with the Delta state government to develop a chain of small river ports along this stretch of the Ethiopia. Ogbank is one of them. The contract includes ferry licensing for the whole district. Any boat that carries passengers on this river will need a permit from the new Port Authority when the system goes live in January." Noah's paddle paused mid-stroke. He did not turn his head, but his listening had changed. The whole shape of his body had gone still. "And your company sent you home to see this contract?" "They sent me because I asked to be sent, Papa. I am the project director. I sign the licenses. I approve the routes. I decide which operators are permitted to run passengers on this river and which are not. That is why I flew home this week. The launch is in 6 weeks. I came early because I wanted to spend a month with you before the work began. I wanted to walk you onto the new jetty myself. I wanted you to see what your son had built. I did not know I would find you in this canoe." Noah lowered the paddle slowly until the blade rested on the wet floor of the canoe. He sat with both hands folded on the shaft. He looked at his son for a long moment, and then he did something Patrick had not seen him do since he was a small boy. Noah smiled. It was a small smile, tired at the corners, but it was real. "So the river has come back to us." "The river has come back to us, Papa, and I am going to tell you now what is going to happen. I am going to write, this afternoon, in your name, a permit for the Ogbanke crossing. Not a temporary permit, a permanent one, for the life of the route. You will be the licensed ferryman of this village. Nobody will operate a passenger boat on this water without your signature. Patrick, I cannot pilot a modern ferry. My eyes. You will not need to pilot it. You will be the master of the route. There will be a proper vessel. Vanderburg builds small aluminum passenger ferries for delta rivers exactly like this one. 28 seats, a canopy, life jackets for every child. A young pilot trained at the Maritime School in Warri, working under your authority. You will stand at the wheel when the children board. You will decide who rides for free. You will set the fares for the traders. It will be your route, Papa, your name." Noah was silent. His eyes had gone to the middle distance, to the place where the water met the sky. "And Justin?" Patrick reached into the wet interior of the canoe and picked up his shoes, which he had set on the crossbeam. Water had already darkened the leather along the soles. He did not seem to notice. "Justin will find that his 3 boats are being audited by the Port Authority next week. I filed the request this morning from Lagos before I flew down. Every registered vessel in the district will have its papers reviewed. Ownership, signatures, fare records, tax filings. If those boats are truly in your name, Papa, and you sign those papers, then the audit will confirm it, and the boats will remain yours to give or keep as you wish. If the signatures on those papers were forged, or if you were tricked into signing what you could not read, then the boats will be seized as evidence, and Justin will answer for it in a courtroom in Warri." Noah closed his eyes. "They will find that the signatures were mine, my son. I did sign. Whatever was above the line, I put my hand to it. Papa, there is a difference between a signature given freely and a signature taken by deception from a man who could not read the document. That is called fraud, and it is a crime under Nigerian law. I have spoken already with a lawyer in Warri. His name is Barrister Ovi. He was 2 years ahead of me at St. Thomas. He is a good man. He will come to the village on Thursday to take your statement. You will tell him what you told me this morning. About Justin coming with the schnapps. About the papers you could not read. About the fares that never reached your hand. He will do the rest. Noah opened his eyes. He looked at his son for a long time. Then he shook his head slowly, but the shake was not a refusal. It was the movement of a man who is trying to fit a very large piece of news into a chest that is not sure it has room. You have thought about this for a long time. I have thought about it for 1 hour, Papa, since I saw you in this canoe. Everything before that hour I had planned differently. I had planned a party. I had planned to buy a goat for the elders. I had planned to walk you down to the new jetty in a good agbada and hand you a captain's cap in front of the whole village. That plan is dead now. This is the plan that took its place. The old man laughed then. It was a soft laugh, dry as palm husk, and it surprised them both. He put one hand over his mouth as if to catch it. My son, you always did think faster than a man ought to think. Your mother used to say your head worked while the rest of you was still asleep. She said the same to me on the day she died, Papa. She told me to think for you when your own thinking got tired. Noah's laugh went quiet. He lifted his hand from his mouth and looked at his palm as if it belonged to somebody else. She said that to you? On the veranda. Before the ambulance came. She held my ear and she said, Patrick, your father is a good man, but a good man in this village can be eaten by his own brothers if nobody stands behind him. When his thinking gets tired, you will think for him. Promise me. I promised. I was 15 years old. I have carried the promise across an ocean and back. Today is the day I keep it. Noah did not speak for a long time. He picked up the paddle. He turned the canoe slowly, using the current, and pointed the bow back toward the village landing. The school children were still waiting in the shade of the mango tree. Ijiro, the tall girl, was on her feet, watching the canoe come back with a hand shading her eyes. There is one more thing I will ask of you, my son. Ask, Papa, the canoe. When the new ferry comes, do not burn this canoe. Do not sell it. Do not chop it up for firewood. She has carried children for 4 years. She deserves a resting place. I will not burn her, Papa. I have already decided where she will go. Where? On a stone platform at the entrance to the new port, under a small roof, so the rains do not eat her, with a brass plate at the bow. I have not written the words yet, but I know what they will say. Noah did not ask what they would say. He nodded once, and he paddled his son home. 6 weeks later, on a Saturday morning in December, the Harmattan wind was blowing thin and white across the Ethiopia, and half of Delta State had come to Ogbanke. Buses had rolled in from Warri and Sapele and Ughelli. The commissioner for transport was there with 2 aides in dark glasses. Barrister Ovi stood at the back of the crowd in a starched white shirt, his briefcase between his ankles. Justin was not there. Justin was in a holding cell in Warri, waiting on a bail, hearing that Barrister Ovi had already made sure would not go easily. The 3 boats had been seized on a Tuesday. The forged signatures had been confirmed by a handwriting expert flown down from Abuja. The village had learned the truth of it slowly, and then all at once, and the women who had stopped greeting Noah in the market had begun, one by one, to knock on his door with bowls of pepper soup and lowered eyes. The new jetty was concrete and steel. It reached out over the water on painted pillars, and at its end sat a small aluminum passenger ferry, 28 seats, a blue canvas canopy, life jackets stacked in neat orange rows on the benches. Along her hull, in white letters 2 feet high, was a single word: Noah. The old man stood on the deck in a captain's cap that fit him properly this time, because his son had measured his head himself the week before at a tailor's shop in Warri. He wore a white shirt and dark trousers, and a pair of black boots that Patrick had polished the night before on Ruth's veranda, because Ruth had come down from her yellow house in another county to see this day, though that is another story for another evening. Beside Noah at the wheel stood a young pilot from the maritime school, 23 years old, name of Godwin, who had already been told by Patrick in private that his real job was to protect the old captain from any wave he could not see coming. The school children boarded first, 41 of them, in blue uniforms and white shirts, laughing shy, some of them holding hands. Ejiro helped the small ones step across the gap between the jetty and the deck. Onomi's mother, Mama Blessing, stood on the shore with her hand pressed flat over her mouth and her eyes shining. She had brought a small cloth-wrapped bundle of fried plantain and had given it to Noah without a word an hour before, and he had put it inside his shirt against his ribs because he was not ready yet to eat it. Patrick stood beside his father at the wheel. He did not wear a jacket. He wore a plain white shirt with the sleeves rolled to the elbow. The brass compass was in his shirt pocket, over his heart, the way it had traveled with him for 10 years. Noah lifted the whistle around his neck and blew it once, a thin, clean sound over the water. Godwin eased the throttle. The ferry pulled away from the jetty. The children waved at the shore. The commissioner raised his hat. The women began to sing an old song from the days of Noah's own mother, a song about a river that remembers every hand that has ever touched it. At the entrance to the new port, on a low stone platform under a small palm thatch roof, the old canoe sat mounted at a gentle angle, her tar patches still visible along her flank. A brass plate was screwed to her bow. It caught the Harmattan sun and threw it back at anyone who came close enough to read the 4 words engraved there. He never stopped rowing. If this story moved you tonight, share it with someone who has been carrying a family alone in silence. Like this video. Subscribe for more stories of ocean-crossed love, family betrayal, and the quiet dignity of parents who never asked for anything in return. And tell me in the comments, where in the world were you sitting when Noah stepped onto his ferry? I read every one. Peace.